Let's look at how to create columns using floats. So right here is sort of a standard layout for larger screen websites. So we have a main content area and then sort of a sidebar. We have our masthead and our footer. So I want to use floats to create these two columns here. So we're going to float the main content to the left and the sidebar to the right is essentially what we're going to do. So let's go and write the code we need for this. So I'll go in here and I'm going to create my header element. Alright, so here's my masthead. Now, if you look in my Photoshop document here, you can see there's sort of yellow behind the columns, and the layer is called main wrapper. So to me, I think that makes sense for it to be, like a div that wraps around those two columns. So let's do that. So we'll create a div here. I'll even give it the class of main wrapper. Alright, so there's my div. And then inside of that, I have my sidebar and my main content. So I'll create another div here. Let's give it the class of main. So this will be for my main column. I have the words main content in there. All right, so that's one column. And then I'll create another div here. Let's give it the class of sidebar. And this will be my sidebar content. Okay, and the last thing we need then is our footer. I'll just put that at the bottom. All right, so here is sort of the HTML I need to create this in the browser. So let's just go look in the browser to see what it looks like right now. All right, so it looks sort of like this. Not really what we're looking for, eh? So let's start by putting some of the colors in that we expect to see and some of the default fonts. So the default font was sans serif, so I'm going to put that in here, normal. All right, so the header had a background color of red. Okay, and the footer had a background color of red. All right, then we had main wrapper, which has the background color of yellow. And then main had a background color of something. Main was green and sidebar was blue. Okay, so background color, that's green, and sidebar, background color of blue. Okay, let's go back to our browser. So there we go. That's looking a little bit more like what we're looking for. So let's go back into Photoshop, and you can see these all sort of have some padding on them. So let's go through all these and we'll put padding on them just to make it look as similar as we can. Oh, main wrapper doesn't have any padding on it. Okay, there we go. So that's what we're looking for, sort of. Now you can see right now main wrapper is sort of hidden. We can't see any of that yellow because it's covered over by the green and blue for the main content in the sidebar. So our header looks right. It looks the way it's supposed to. And our copyright looks the way it's supposed to. The only thing we're sort of missing is this space between the header and the footer. So that's probably coming from the main wrapper. So let's put a margin on it here. So I want, say, 1em on the top and bottom and 0 on the sides. So there we go. That creates the space I want. Okay, so let's look at how the float is actually going to work here. So we have our main content and we have our sidebar. What we want to do is float our main content to the left and float our sidebar to the right to give us sort of this effect. So let's go, we're going to float this one to the left, okay, and we'll float the sidebar to the right. All right, so there we go, that's it. And there. So we have our main content and our sidebar. They're beside each other, but our footer has a wacky issue right now. Okay, so let's put some widths on these. So let's say that the main content is something like, I don't know, 65% wide and the sidebar is something like 30% wide. Just sort of guessing here to see. So 65% for the main and 30% for the sidebar. All right, so wait, that doesn't add up, does it? Now that's an interesting thing because if we think about the box model here, the padding is actually adding on to the total width. So the width is no longer 65. It's 65 plus 1 padding, 1 m of padding on the left and 1 m of padding on the right. So we could sort of fix this problem by using box sizing and setting it to border box. This will help us to sort of fix these width and padding related issues. Okay, so that looks closer to what we want. That's sort of the generally what we're looking for. You can see because we use percents, it's nice and flexible. So that's perfect. Now, we do have a little bit of a weird issue with our footer right here. You can see the footer content is sort of fitting up in this space here. And the footer, the red box, is all up in behind here. So if we remember about floats, when we float something, it removes that element from the standard flow. Any block level element will go up in behind that floated element, and any content will sort of wrap around it. So the red box right here is a block level element, and you can see it's gone up in behind both of these floated columns. And my text is actually wrapping. It's wrapping around the green box, and that's why it's sort of fitting up in the space here. So if we wanted to get the header underneath the things that we floated, we would just use the companion property. Sorry, I meant to get the footer underneath the things we floated, we would use floats companion, which is clear. So in this situation, we want to do clear both because we're floating something to the left and something to the right. So we'll do a clear both here, and there we go. You can see our footer is now underneath, which is what we're looking for. But if we go back to our Photoshop file for a second here, you can see we're missing the yellow. The yellow just doesn't exist. It's kind of gone. And if we do a little bit of inspecting, you'll notice if I hover over the main wrapper right here, you can see it's got a height. You can see down here, let's look at metrics. You can see it's got a height of 0 pixels. So its height is 0 pixels. Now let's think about why its height is 0. The two children of the main wrapper, main and sidebar, are floated. When things get removed from the flow, they no longer increase the height of their parent element. So in this situation here, main wrapper has only 2 children, and both of those children are floated. So main wrapper essentially has no content inside it, no flow content, that will allow it to expand to the height that it needs. So what we really want to do is target main wrapper and force it to wrap around its 2 floated children. So we want to create what's called a new flow route. And to do that, there's a few different ways to do that. One way is we can target main wrapper and type overflow hidden on it. And this will then force it to wrap around all of its floated children. Just like that. So there, we have our yellow and we have our space back again. So overflow hidden works in many situations, but there are some situations where it doesn't, and that's where we can use what's called a Clearfix instead. So let's look at how the Clearfix works instead of overflow hidden. So I'm going to get rid of overflow hidden, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to add a second class to my main wrapper called Clearfix. All right, so I have my Clearfix class on here, and I'm just going to add some styles for it. So you don't really need to remember this Clearfix CSS. You can just find it online. It's all over the place. All right, so there we go. We have the same fix. Okay, so this looks a little bit weird, I have to admit. Now, the problem with overflow, so overflow is a perfectly good solution most of the time. But sometimes you want stuff to sort of stick out of the box, the overflow box, or the main wrapper box for some sort of images that stick out or something like that. And if we were to use overflow, those images would just disappear. Whereas if we were to use this Clearfix solution, the images wouldn't disappear. You would still be able to see them. So what I would say is use overflow first, and if it's sort of chopping off things and you can't see stuff, then switch to this overflow technique instead. And that is essentially how we make columns. So we float something to the left, float something to the right, and we can sort of create columns the way we've just done.